there was a lot of the Rodney King.
Yeah.
How old were you when the Rodney King
I was
taping
in high school,
surfaced?
like
Yes.
maybe 11th grade.
You have an interesting experience with race. Generation Gen X does.
I do, because
And a lot of you raised millennials and Gen Zs.
That's right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I didn't hear much about race, as is pretty typical, I think, of white people. If I heard anything about race, it was, don't talk about it. We don't talk about that. It's rude. I've often thought about how social etiquette was a great barrier, is a great barrier to racial equity and equality. Because if you don't talk about the problem, it just stays right where it is. So, but yeah, I was taught, there was definitely, I came up with an understanding without ever having it said to me that white people were superior. I can remember comments like someone talking about, this is kind of painful, raw stuff, so I'm sorry to even
go ahead.
Have to say it.
Say it.
I remember hearing comments like, well, don't you think black people look more like monkeys than white people?
None of this shocks any black person listening to this. So
I know that. And
we know.
I'm not
Currently, AI is being used to, they finally, one of the ones had to just pull Martin Luther King's face off. They were repurposing Martin Luther King making speeches and having him make ape noises.
I feel like that's all recycled.
It's being recycled, yeah.
It's being recycled. It's the very same stuff that
so then guess what? It means they are still talking like this, but
yes.
we look like monkeys. So go ahead, just say what you're going to say.
Well,
no
hearing
filter.
that I shouldn't have to apologize for being white, I grew up in that culture hearing that. So I don't want to put anybody down by who I heard this from or that from. What I'm trying to convey is simply that was my normal, and I was absorbing that.
And you didn't think you were racist or had any racial blind spots?
I don't know. I never really thought about it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have said I'm racist if you'd asked me, but I don't think I even thought about it.
So you didn't think about it. But you did not consciously think you were a racist though, right?
No.
You weren't like, I hate black people.
No. And I was taught not to think like that.
Right.
That's what was so confusing about the whole thing. It wasn't until I was an adult looking back on it that I was able to sort a lot of that out and realize how poisonous a lot of what I had absorbed was. And I think that's what has given me a passion for talking to other white people about it and advocating, especially for black children in my community, because I just know that's necessary.
She said that was my normal. She said it was confusing because she said I knew, well, that's not a nice thing to say, that don't black people kind of look like monkeys. And then of course the president of the United States sharing that meme. And he clipped it down to just the one where Michelle and Barack were monkeys, and it's just this constant reminder. Doesn't matter if you went to Harvard. Doesn't matter if you married and had all your kids by the same woman. Also married another woman who has 2 Ivy League degrees. Right? Doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. You guys are monkeys. Doesn't matter that you reached this height. Black people are still less than us. Right. And you got the president of the United States sharing that.
Yeah.
But back to her point, she said, but that was my normal.
Right. Recently, when that all came out, it was interesting to me to watch, the thing on the Truth Social for the president, and watch it become a contentious thing. Because for me, it should be a non-issue, right? It's this is wrong. And the fact that we're arguing about it, I think, speaks to where we are in our culture as far as pushback. Suddenly, that's a bad thing to try to not be racist, it seems. And so that was a strange moment for me. And I said something, in my sermon that Sunday, and it was weird because I felt like I was stepping out on a limb, and it just didn't seem like, if I could imagine myself as a child being a grown man preaching and talking about racism and thinking I might be stepping on a landmine here, I don't really feel like I would have understood that, oh, you're saying something risky here. But it just wasn't my upbringing, and yet I still can acknowledge that there are parts of me that still I'm discovering I never knew that was there, and I don't like it. and I need to work on that, like, and I'm having these thoughts, or I'm having this reaction, or even like what you said with the Good Samaritan, of like, I'm not having a reaction, and that is a problem. I think a lot of it is what Jen is talking about, and credit to you for giving permission to be honest and vulnerable in that moment, and truthful, is just like a honest reflection on how transformation is necessary, and it's an ongoing thing. And we might have talked about this before, of like Paul's letter to the church in Rome in chapter 12. He talks about, do not be conformed by the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. When I talk about that, I talk about how, to me, it's very important that it says renewing, that it's an ongoing, like, that this is not something I get to wake up and kind of going back to like my thoughts as a child, like, I don't get to wake up in the morning and be like, oh, good morning, world, glad I don't have to deal with racism, like, and again, like, I say that as like, my dealing with racism is not hard, right? But but it's
and as a white male, you are at the top of the chain.
But like, like I said, like, I thought for a long time that was something that had been dealt with and put to bed. And I think a lot of it is like like, this is part of the renewing that Paul, I think, is talking about. It's not all of it.
That is perfectly stated. And Russ, you're not, most white people, I think that on a level. Like, they think, we may make a comment here or there, but like, y'all need to get over it. Y'all need to and not like, it's just like, that's over with, that's done with here, that. But it's like making them face it. And what gets me is when you make white people face it and see it, then they want to run from it, and they're uncomfortable. So it's like white people are constantly contradicting themselves on that. It's over, it's done with. Well, if it's so over and done with, you shouldn't feel this level of discomfort. If something is so minuscule, and black people make a big deal out of nothing, you should just be able to speak about this freely. So white people's own actions of not wanting to address it actually furthers black people's point that no, this isn't over.